This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and the purpose of this podcast is very simple. It is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And Eddie Jones, over the weekend, we had some good and not so good games of rugby played. Certainly the game between Argentina and England in Argentina, in San Juan, was fantastic. In Suva, Fiji, Scotland, a great occasion, and again, seeing the Fijian crowd come to life. But for mine, the pick of the weekend was the match in South Africa at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium in Port Elizabeth. It was absolutely electric. But before we talk about that, Eddie Jones, your performance, your team in Kobe, a game played in front of another packed crowd up there. You didn't quite get the chocolates this week.
No, we just struggled a bit to get emotionally right for the game. Younger team, getting ourselves up again after the win last week. And we were a little bit off the pace in the first half. Second half, we stuck at it and got into the position to win the game, but we just weren't quite good enough.
So the result didn't go your way, but again, another big crowd in Japan, another packed house, and I believe a great occasion for rugby again in Japan.
Yeah, no, it's a great stadium, Kobe, indoor stadium, about 30,000 people. I think they got close to packing that out, and it was a good atmosphere. A small contingent, but very loud contingent of Welsh fans who were absolutely relieved to have a win.
Yeah. So we'll come to probably the two disappointing matches for me over the weekend, the one in Adelaide between the AU-NZ team and the Lions, and the All Blacks France game in Wellington seemed to be a little bit flat, although I did enjoy the Wallabies Black Ferns, which was the curtain raiser in Wellington. But the match in Port Elizabeth, have you had the opportunity to see it yet?
No, I haven't seen that game yet, mate.
Okay.
I'll have a look today.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of interesting rugby innovations there. Rassie went for this sort of kickoff at the beginning of the game, which forced a scrum, and they've got this other move that they're now doing, which is a sort of line out in the middle of play. But I just want to comment on the crowd and the atmosphere and everything about the game in Port Elizabeth. It was just outstanding. There were young, there were old, there were white, there were black, there were coloured. The energy in the stadium was absolutely electric. And when we're thinking about the way rugby presents itself to the world, it was just such an incredible occasion in front of 46,000 people there. The Springboks played with 14 men for pretty much 2/3 of the game. The electric team and the depth of the South Africans and the crowd rising to support it. It is just an absolute must watch. So if you're listening and you have the opportunity to go and have a look at that game, it really fills your heart with joy. And that was really what came out of the game. And so too, seeing the Fijians get up over Scotland. It's just every time you turn on the television and you see the rugby played out of Fiji, it's the game in its purest form, and it's such a joy. So it'll be hard for you. Do you get to the Japanese team, Eddie? Do you go to Suva this year and play them?
No, the PNC is essentially in the
that's right.
States.
It's in the States, isn't it?
Using it as a bit of a dress rehearsal, a mini dress rehearsal for the World Cup. We're playing in Sacramento and then Denver and then Salt Lake City, so we've got a bit of travel and be interested to see the development of rugby in the States at the moment.
And Suva, though, what are your memories of Suva and coaching teams and playing in Suva? It is just, again, the joy that the Fijians bring to the game. It's just contagious. Just watching them, it's fun.
Well, last time I went there, mate, with Suva, we played Japan played against Fiji, and we played in the monsoon. The water was, literally 6 inches above the ground, and it was just one quagmire. Our scrum got pushed from Suva to Naisori. I remember I had to throw away my shoes at the end of the game. It was like literally a monsoon, mate. and they gave us a bit of a serving.
Yeah. Anyway, so
not good memories.
I haven't been I played there many years ago at that stadium, but I can't wait to go there and experience that as a rugby occasion. Just again, watching it, you can just see the joy. And again, that Port Elizabeth, it was next level. And I would encourage everyone to go and have a look at it and have a look at that Springbok team. Eddie Jones, they are frighteningly good, aren't they, at the moment, the Springboks? They're good and they're getting better. They have so much depth in their 54-man squad that they've got now. And then they have an under-20s team who are carrying all before them in the under-20s championship in northern Italy. If you were looking for an early favourite for the 2027 World Cup, the Springboks are going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, no, everything seems to be in line at the moment. They've got good young players coming through. Obviously, the depth has improved with a number of black and Cape players coming through, which has just expanded the gene pool for South Africa. They've got a very identifiable way of playing rugby, which has been aided by the new group of players coming through because they're able to now, off any turnover ball and kick return, really hurt you. But those two innovations, I think they're questionable, again, against the spirit of the game. If you don't intentionally kick the ball off 10 metres, it's a penalty, because it's against the spirit of the game.
Yeah.
And lift a player in general plays penalty.
Yeah.
Like you can't take a player out because you can't tackle him. And the question there is, why isn't the referee dealing with that? We had a situation on the weekend, which I won't go into too much because I don't feel like getting a fine, where, again, the referees just aren't refereeing the laws of the game. And they got one job to do. They got one simple job to do, is to referee the laws of the game. And I think this whole conundrum with how much the TMO does, how much the referee does, really needs to be sorted out, because, it hurts our game, because our game can be so much better if we have clear refereeing and clear adjudicating from the TMO on certain issues. And I think it's the one biggest thing we need to sort out at the moment in rugby.
So let's just look. Well, let's talk about the two that happened in Port Elizabeth. Do you think that the referee is just overwhelmed because they, haven't seen it for the first time? They've got to make a decision straight away, and therefore they just got the decision wrong? And the same with the lifting and the lineups?
He's only got one job to do, mate. That's to referee the laws of the game. That's what he's there for. That's all he's got to do. Just see everything he can, make a decision on it. It's not, if it's against the laws of the game, you penalise it. And if it's around the laws of the game, you give it a warning. Yeah. Or the spirit of the game, the spirit and the laws of the game are the same. Because rugby's a game where we have a fine balance between contest and continuity. And that's the laws of the game. But then within that, the referees have got to make decisions on whether you're breaking the laws or the spirit of the game.
So it sounds like, they won't last long. But again,
it shouldn't, mate. It shouldn't.
Yeah,
because it shouldn't, because it forces into a scrum, right?
Yeah,
that you intentionally set up a scrum, right?
Yeah.
So we weren't allowed a scrum on the weekend. Like, this tells you the difference in the ways the game's being refereed, and tells you then, for fans, how do you follow the trend of the game, and for players, how do you work out what's right and what's not right? Like, we're basically not allowed to scrummage on the weekend, whereas we've got another game where a team's allowed to set up as many scrums as they want.
So just explain your incident, because we haven't seen...
I'm not going into it, mate, because I don't want to get fined, mate.
All right.
Because, I'm that angry about it.
Okay.
I'd rather not say anything about it.
All right. I don't want to provoke you then. I don't want to provoke you, or not yet. The other thing, actually, we're not seeing that. We didn't see the Japanese and Wales games. They're not on television here in Australia, so I don't know why the broadcaster in Australia hasn't bought the rights to those particular matches. So anyway, that's another issue for another time. Over in Wellington, we saw another match, and it was probably the All Blacks A versus France C, they completely turned over their team. And hopefully this is obviously what the Nations Cup is going to try to address, that teams are going to be trying to win as opposed to developing players, because the French team was almost a complete turnover of the next team. And while they've got plenty of depth, it wasn't much of a contest. And if I was a fan going to that particular game thinking that I was going to be seeing the best of All Blacks versus the best in France, and I've paid my money and I get the best of the All Blacks versus, the third best team out of France, you're going to be pretty dark about that, aren't you?
Well, I think there's a couple of things on that, and certainly what you're saying is right. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. But then rugby is the most physical game in the world, maybe apart from rugby league. It is the most physically taxing game in the world. So players need to have proper pre-seasons. And a proper pre-seasons means that you have 6 weeks of general recovery, general maintenance work, then 6 weeks of specific rugby work to get yourself right and to build your body up again. In that period of time, you can build your body up again for the contest. So the French rugby union, in its wisdom, has said for its best players, they're going to give them the opportunity to do that. Because if they go on tour, they don't get that, and that's the difficult part. Everyone wants to talk about the welfare of players, but then when it comes to money, the welfare doesn't come into it. So the French are trying to look after their best players, trying to give them the best chance to be in their best physical condition for the next season, and therefore they leave them out of the series. And this problem we've got in world rugby pertains only to the top players. It doesn't pertain to the bulk of players in the world. It's just the top players that are consistently playing international rugby.
Yeah, but I think the issue with the game on the weekend, though, was that the first week they rolled out a particular team and then they rolled the next team. So it was more about, I think, giving players opportunities to play at an international level to see whether or not they can or they can't, as opposed to putting out the most competitive, fit team that they'd brought to New Zealand for that contest. Because the All Blacks jumped out of the ground and it was sort of there was nothing to watch the game, and then the crowd is sitting there, and it just was, it was a bit of a letdown for me, because I always look forward to watching the All Blacks play France, but that was all over pretty quickly, and I don't know, it just didn't feel right watching the game. So anyway, that was that one. And as I say, I did enjoy the Wallaroos versus the Black Ferns earlier. The Australians are obviously improving. The All Blacks way too good in the end, but some great performances there by Georgia Miller, Portia Woodman-Wycliffe, these really high quality players who we're going to see in the Women's World Cup later in the year. So that's going to be pretty exciting. But that leads us, Eddie Jones, on to the next match, which was in Adelaide. And I think, as we foreshadowed last week, it was likely to be a disappointment, and it certainly delivered on that front. It really wasn't a great occasion for the game, and certainly not a great occasion for the fans. It was a pretty ordinary evening.
Yeah, well, it was a filler game, wasn't it? It should have, as we spoke about, it should have been Australia. It should have been the best young players from Australia playing for something, playing for their careers, playing for their pride of their nation, playing for an opportunity to play in the Lions series and to test the Lions. And in its place, we had a filler game that was comprised of players that, obviously tried hard, but had no cohesion, no unity, and really nothing to play for. And it was disappointing, mate, because it ended up being a training run for the Lions, and I don't know if they'd be that pleased with the game. They'd obviously get a bit of confidence out of it, but did they find out anything about their team any more than they had previously? Probably not.
No.
But it looks like they're pretty much settled on their starting 15, you would guess.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a moment. But just one thing before we drift off from that, as I was watching it, and just the presentation around the music at that particular game, it was just completely over the top. And I get that they want to try to fill in the flat spots, but it seemed like couldn't wait to get, play the next track, and it was just, I found it watching it on the TV, it was just like, stop, calm down. And again, going back to my favourite game at Port Elizabeth over the weekend in the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium, they used the music to support the crowd as opposed to using the music to overwhelm the crowd. And really, I think that's where we head to this weekend, is that this Lions series so far has been low energy, as I described it last week. And really, we have to bring the atmosphere this week. We have to try to address some of this low energy that we've had so far in the series. And we've got to get the Australians in their gold. We've got to get them noisy. We've got to get the Lions fans in their red, and we've got to get them noisy, because so far we just haven't had the energy that we're all been looking forward to. So I'm looking forward to that happening. But from a rugby point of view, which is going to spark it all, Eddie Jones, we went through the Lions team in our last episode last week, but there's been some changes. Looks like Gary Ringrose is out. So would that mean bigger changes for you once Ringrose is out? Does that lead to larger changes in the team? Because you were heading down that Irish pairing, but if Ringrose is there, obviously, are you more likely to go to the Scottish pair?
Well, I think that's likely. Like, Tupeloto's probably got better as the tour's gone on. I still think our key in the first test particularly, he's just such a strong, dependable test player, takes the ball forward strongly, makes his tackles strong over the ball, low mistake, low error rate. Yeah, the other bloke's probably got a bit more X factor about him, but we really haven't seen him in a hugely pressured game, which the first test of the Lions series will be. But they may go that way now with Hugh Jones as the starting 13.
Yeah. And so, into this week, as sitting back watching it, what's your assessment of it? Where are the Wallabies and where are the Lions? Given that the first test, as you've said for many weeks now, is going to be so critically important, and certainly for the Wallabies, to get a win up in Brisbane in the first test is going to be essential if they're going to win the series. But as you're watching from afar, what are you seeing out of those two teams?
Well, the only thing I've seen is the power differentiation between the Lions and the teams they've played against. Yeah, they're consistently been at a level and intensity above the teams they've played against, albeit with some errors in their handling and some set-piece errors, which again seems to be minimalised as the games go on. And you just worry, can the Australians cope with the power? I think it shows there's a differentiation, starting to get a differentiation between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere rugby. The players look much better conditioned, much stronger, being able to play longer periods with intensity than the Australian players. But having said that, first test of the series, the Australians will be 100% ready for it. They've had a great preparation, long time in camp. Joe will have them extremely well prepped tactically. They'll have a way they want to play against the Lions, and they'll be able to execute that. And, given Joe's attention to detail, the Australian sides will be well prepped. It's just whether they can cope with that consistency of intensity around the breakdown and around the ball will be the test. I think Australia will get out quickly and maybe get a lead early, and it's just whether they can cope with the Lions' intensity.
So how important is the crowd? How important is that the Australian fans come to the game visible, noisy, supportive? How big a difference does it make if the Australian crowd can get up for this week?
I think, the fans are always important, mate. They're always massively important. But the game tends to generate the momentum for the fans to give more. Like, what do you want as a home team? When you're under pressure, you want the fans to be really giving some signs of encouragement for the players, and sometimes that can lift them to another level. When you're under pressure, that really gets you going. But, they'll walk into the stadium before the game, hour and a half before the game, And, most stadiums now, apart from France, where the fans are generally in pretty early, most of them are out in the hospitality drinking. And so the atmosphere before the game, generally speaking, is pretty much the same everywhere in the world, apart from, as I said, France, where they don't have a lot of hospitality, and the fans are there, and you can hear them during the warm up. Whereas for most grounds, they're not in. South Africa's a bit halfway on that.
Well, so I think they can make a contribution. They have to make a contribution. They have to get dressed in their goal, because I think the Wallabies are going to need all the help that they can get to take on this very powerful Lions team. But you're coaching this week. What's the game plan for Australia? If Eddie Jones was coaching the Wallabies, what would you be saying? What would you be telling the team? What would be the game plan that you would be putting in place to beat this Lions team?
Oh, you'd be thinking, what have you got to take away from the Lions, and where potentially are the weaknesses, and what are the strengths of the Australians? So if you look at the Australian team, there is definitely a superiority in the air with Sawali there. The game we played on the weekend had 30 contestable kicks. So it's the second biggest number of contests in the game now. With the change of the escort law, now contestable kicks have gone up, particularly from 9. So that's going to be a huge part of the game. So if Australia can get in the game early by winning a few of those contest kicks, get back-to-back possessions, get a lead, then make the Lions play from behind, which they haven't had to do on tour. They've never had to come from behind. So, I would be thinking, how can we get out early, get a lead, put them under pressure, make them play a little bit differently.
Okay. And then in terms then of the composition of the Australian team, are you going for pace? Are you going for size? What are you doing there?
Oh, just the best players, mate. You just got to pick the best players. And I think clearly there's a team there where you just pick the best players and get them to do their stuff. I don't think there's a lot of differentiation in power and pace between the Australian players. Jorgensen's a standout on the wing. He's just an unbelievable player. Sawali's got to be in the back 3. Donaldson's probably the standout at 10. And then you either go for a more running 9 in Tate McDermott or the kicking short side type play of Nick White. So there's not too many decisions there to be made.
Mm. And so, looking at it, what do you think is going to be the result?
Well, I think if Australia can get that early lead and make the Lions play from behind, they've never had to play from behind. So that we don't know how they'll respond when they're under real pressure, and that's what you want to find out. So my prediction would be Australia will get to the lead, and then can they maintain that lead? But they've got to find a way to put the Lions under pressure, because the Lions, if you watched anything on the weekend, it was how square and straight they were up and down the field in defence, and similarly in attack. They were nice and square. They've got a huge work ethic off the ball. Their attack, I think, as the tour's gone on, has looked straighter and more decisive. There was a period of play there where Luke Cowan-Dickie got tackled in the corner, which was just sublime rugby. I think they went left-hand side scrum. They played a sort of a dummy 12-13, hit the 13. He gets a quick ball. Earl comes around the corner, carries. They go to the sideline. Then they play with the first bit of deception out the back. It goes through. 13 makes a line break, gives it to Luke Cowan-Dickie, who was unluckily didn't score. Would have been a fantastic try. And it was almost, that was the template of how the Lions want to play. Use their set piece to advantage to get over the game line, then play the same way, pull them apart, and then use some deception to get through them.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive in parts, and I think if they do put it together this weekend, it is going to be a big challenge for the Wallabies, because it's a long time since the Australian team have been successful. I went back over the last 12 years and had a look at the results over a number of years, and it's been a long time since we've had a consistent team and a team that would be able to challenge. So I don't go into the game with any great hope. Certainly, I'll be supporting them as best as I can. But I think, some of the skills and some of that difference in power, I think, is just going to overwhelm the Wallabies, and I'm just not sure that they're quite going to be able to hold the Lions at bay. I think they've got too many points in them, the Lions, and I think they're going to win, and I think they're going to win quite comfortably. I've got to say, I just can't see this Australian team are going to be able to hold them, because it just. Where's the confidence? Where's the confidence come from? Still Super Rugby. Everyone talks about, another great year. Well, really, I don't think it was. We're a little bit more competitive, but not really. Not too convincing against the Fijians the other day, and I think the Lions are starting to run into a bit of form. And so anyway, which is why the fans have got to do whatever they can to support them, because I think many years ago you used to refer to Suncorp as Australia's home ground. That was the place that you used to like to coach Wallaby teams the most.
Yeah, I think it's probably got the best atmosphere. The fans are closest. They're good rugby fans. There's always a good atmosphere in that ground, and the conditions, generally speaking, it's a fast track. It's a fast track, which is generally suited Australia. It's a good surface, generally always a good surface, and the fast track, it suits Australia. But I think all the things you're saying, Pemby, the thing you can't discount is the psychology of the game. Australia first up, Lions series, big occasion, underdogs. So all week they're going to be told, like you're saying, they can't win. Yeah, and that's traditionally when the Australian sides are at their best, when they fight the hardest, they find something in them that they haven't found before. And I think that's the opportunity for them, whereas the Lions are being told, well, you've won every game, you're looking better all the time. And the press in the Northern Hemisphere, they either build you up as demigods or, you can't get out of your own way. And at the moment, they're being built up as demigods. Genge is the best loose head in the world. Jamie George comes in as fourth hooker, 100 test caps for England. This is the strength we've got. Pollock's, invented the game of rugby. So there's all that going on behind, which again, experienced team handles. And I'm not saying the Lions won't handle it, but it is a factor. They have got a youngish captain and youngish group in terms of Lions experience. And it's a different game, the first test. We saw that if you go back to 2001, Australia, remember, were red-hot favourites first test. Red-hot at the Gabba, right?
Yep.
One of the best Australian teams ever. Lions not given a chance, right?
Yep.
For some reason the pitch is wet, right? Australians slip over, Lions get in the game and win the game, and at the end of the series, Australia won because they had the much stronger team, and you saw that in the second half of both the second and third tests, and you know about it better than me. But the psychology of that first test got the Lions a start in that series and made them competitive. And then they almost tore themselves apart, didn't they, in the tour? So there's all these sort of things going on behind. If you just put them down in terms of rugby and talent, you think the Lions are a lay-down misère, but there's more to rugby than that.
No, and I agree. But what I don't agree with is that, this lack of engagement in the week leading up to the game to try to impact that psychology. If the Wallabies stay quiet and they don't try to create some sort of pressure and try to bring that to bear, and it just turns up on Saturday and they don't put any pressure on the Lions this week in the build-up to the game, they're not trying to create the advantage. And you'll remember this. 2019 with England, the All Blacks had absolutely destroyed Ireland in that week prior to the semi-final. But then we implemented a strategy in that week leading up to that semi-final, which I'll absolutely believe that it was the right thing to do to try to get as much heat on the All Blacks as possible. And I think it worked in our favour at that time. I think if the Wallabies just we're not going to say anything this week because we don't want to upset people, we don't want to do it. I just think that will play into the hands of the Lions. And unfortunately, I don't believe that this group of players is going to be good enough to be able to get up to the challenge. So let's wait and see. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I want to see a contest, but I just don't believe that they're good enough.
But I reckon, mate, all that sort of pre-game stuff's been killed by social media.
I know,
you said that. Because people don't want to put themselves out there now. Like, yeah, we had a situation on the weekend where I wanted to talk to the head of the referees post the game. I'm not allowed to talk to him because I've got to talk to the referee first. Like, our political correctness has gone through the roof now in rugby.
Okay, you're still obviously getting over something at the weekend that I have no knowledge of. So, anyway, we'll move on. But look, I don't want to be seen
I
don't want to be I don't want to be seen as to being disloyal. But I do now that I'm a commentator. Now that I can give people the benefit of my wisdom. That's just my view. And look, I don't agree with you. I actually think. There needs to be a way of attracting attention. If there's nothing in the papers this week, if there's nothing in the media, if it's all just, ho-hum and we respect you and you respect us, that's dull, that's boring, and it just doesn't create any type of advantage in the week where, at the best of times, you want people not sleeping well. You want people thinking about stuff. So anyway, perhaps it's gone out of the game. Maybe I'm a dinosaur, but certainly over many, many years, we used it as a weapon. We used it as a weapon every week to try to create that competitive advantage. And I just think not using it is an opportunity missed. That's my view.
Well, look what happened with Billy. Look what happened with Billy Slater when he even vaguely went down that line to take some pressure off his team. He got absolutely hammered for that, right? He got absolutely hammered. Now, maybe it wasn't the right way to do it, but he got absolutely hammered for that. And he doesn't get anything out of that. And you could see it was obviously distressed him.
It was a miscalculation. It was a miscalculation.
That's okay, but all these things, if you want to go into the and media and do those sort of things, you're taking a huge risk, right? And particularly today, it's even more so a huge risk because there's someone out there that feels like it's not right, and then they make one comment, and then you get 700 million comments about that. And that's how it is, mate. That's why people don't want to do it.
Yeah, but when the odds are stacked against you, risk. Reward. What's the risk? What's the reward? And my view is if they stay quiet this week, the Lions will just go beautiful. We don't have to, and nothing to worry about, nothing to concern about us here. We're going to be fine, and away we go. But anyway, let's move on from that because I just want to wrap up with a couple of things. I do want to acknowledge Willie Roux, 100 games for the Springboks. What a player, Eddie Jones, over a long period of time.
Yeah, I reckon him and Elliot Daly are very similar sort of players. They're understated players, but their value to the team in terms of their rugby intelligence and their communication with their tens. Like I'm sure most tens love to play with Willie because he's second pair of eyes, and he seems like a bit of a character. I've seen him a few times around Cape Town. He's got a bit of life about him. He's a good lad, and he's deservedly gets his 100 caps.
Yeah, fantastic for Willie Roux, and great to see the giant Pablo Matera. In the game in San Juan between Argentina and England, became the most capped Puma at 111. He's played all over the world. He's played in England. He's played in Japan. Obviously a great test player. Big, solid, hard-working, hard-hitting footballer. Again, someone I'm sure you've had a lot to do with over the years. Yeah,
no, very good player. Influenced his team a lot. He played for Honda here in the League One, who were right at the bottom of the table. And when he was on, he changed the team. He made them competitive.
Yeah.
Just some days he forgot to turn the engine on.
Yeah, well, I've always loved him. I think he's a great player, and congratulations to Pablo Matera to becoming the greatest or the most capped Puma of all time with 111. So, Eddie Jones, all remains to be seen. Let's just hope it is a wonderful occasion where all of the supporters in the ground, everyone related to the event, brings the energy, brings the occasion, and we have a cracking start to the Lions and Wallabies Test Series. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have introduced a Substack for Rugby Unity, and I'd encourage you to go over to Substack. Just Google Substack Rugby Unity. So we're up and running on the Substack, and this week we have a guide for the first test in Brisbane. So it's a guide to the food, markets, the races, what day trips you can do, where to get the best coffee. So it's a guide that the team has put together for people who are in Brisbane. So whether you're a Wallabies fan or a Lions fan, jump onto the Substack at Rugby Unity, subscribe, it's free, and then you can download that guide. And a big congratulations and thanks for the team for putting that all together. And we will have guides for Melbourne and Sydney being published in the weeks ahead. And thanks again for all of your interest and engagement on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and also for your questions. Daniel, thank you for your questions, and please keep sending them through, and we will keep reviewing them as we keep to assess the third voice. So, Eddie Jones, what now for you? The two-test series is over. What are you up to now?
Yeah, no, we've got P&C coming up in 4 or 5 weeks, so the players get a week's break. We'll review what we've done, then start planning for the P&C. So, as I said, most of it's played in America, so looking forward to seeing how the rugby's going in America. But there's a couple of upsets there on the weekend. I saw Spain beat America and Belgium beat Canada, which again shows the growing strength of European rugby.
It does. Well, all the very best for that, and look forward to talking about that in a little bit more detail. But we'll be speaking to you again later in the week as we get closer to the test match and preview it in all its detail, closer to the game on Friday. But to you, the audience, thank you so much for coming back once again, and thank you for all of your support for Rugby Unity. It is very gratefully accepted by both Eddie and myself. So anyway, for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and we'll see you later in the week.